Every generation faces its own Gog and Magog. But the greatest battlefield is not in the valleys of the earth. It is within the human soul, a space where we unveil the mysteries of the Torah, the wisdom of the prophets, and the hidden codes of ancient Israel that still speak to our world today. If you feel drawn to understand what's happening in the world through a deeper spiritual lens, subscribe now and become part of this awakening journey. Before we continue, write in the comments these words: I seek the wisdom behind the prophecy, because those who seek, receive. Those who question are invited into revelation. Now take a breath. You've heard people talk about Ezekiel's vision, about a great war, mysterious nations, and fire from heaven. Many fear it. Many interpret it only through the lens of destruction. But ancient sages tell us Ezekiel 38 and 39 are not just about nations rising against Israel. They are about the forces that rise within humanity when divine order is about to return. Imagine this: a valley filled with silence, where the dust of ages hides forgotten bones of purpose. Ezekiel walks there, hearing a voice from eternity asking, "Son of man, can these bones live?" And somewhere deep inside, the same question is asked to every soul that listens. Can your faith live again? Can your light rise from what has been buried? In the days of the prophet, Israel was surrounded by powers greater than itself. Empires rose and fell, but the people of the covenant remained, scarred, but not destroyed. The prophecy of Gog and Magog comes from that moment of apparent weakness when hope seemed impossible. Yet, within the scrolls of despair, the Eternal hid a secret. Every collapse carries within it the seed of rebirth. This is not just a story of nations. It is a mirror. The war in Ezekiel is not only political, it is mystical. It is the clash between ego and spirit, illusion and truth, pride and humility, darkness and divine light. It is the moment when humanity must choose between control and surrender, between the noise of the world and the whisper of the eternal. Every time we turn away from our inner covenant, every time we worship the idols of success, fear, or self, Gog rises again. Every time we forget the sacred rhythm of the Sabbath, the gratitude of blessing, or the humility of prayer, Magog advances. This is the unseen war, fought not with swords but with intentions, thoughts, and choices. Ezekiel's words are ancient, but their echo vibrates through the times we live in now. The sages wrote that in the final days, the battle will not begin in the fields, but in the minds of men. Confusion, arrogance, greed, these are the armies of Gog. And when they march, they seek to dethrone the eternal within the human heart. But what if the true prophecy was never about fear, but about return? What if the fire that falls from heaven is not destruction, but purification? What if the victory described by Ezekiel is not about nations destroyed, but about souls restored to their divine origin? That is the revelation we will uncover, not through fear, but through wisdom. Not through prediction, but through understanding. The rabbis say, prophecy is not a forecast of doom, but an invitation to alignment. Ezekiel's vision is calling this generation to awaken, not to panic at the signs, but to prepare the heart. Because what comes upon the world is often the reflection of what is unresolved within the soul of humanity. So, stay with me. Because what is written in chapters 38 and 39 hides a pattern, a divine code that explains not only what is happening in the world, but what is awakening in your spirit. We will enter the sacred text itself, verse by verse, to uncover the secret meaning of Gog and Magog, according to Jewish wisdom, Kabbalah, and the ancient commentaries of the prophets. But first, remember, this is not a story about the end. It is the revelation of a beginning. Write again in the comments if you feel this call. My spirit is awakening, and prepare your heart. Because from this point forward, what you will hear is not just a teaching, it is a mirror of your own destiny. When Ezekiel opened his scroll and wrote the words of chapter 38, he was standing at the border between two realities, the visible world, and the hidden dimension where history and spirit meet. He heard the Eternal saying, "Son of man, set your face against Gog, of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him." Every Hebrew letter of that verse breathes both warning and promise. To understand it, we must enter the inner language of prophecy, the language of symbols. In Hebrew, Gog, Giviog, comes from a root meaning roof or covering. The sages say Gog represents the force that tries to place a roof between man and heaven, to seal the flow of divine light with arrogance and self-reliance. Magog, from the same root with the prefix ma, means place of covering, the environment, the system, the culture that sustains that illusion. Together they describe the structure of spiritual exile, an individual's pride supported by a world built on forgetfulness of the Creator. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai wrote in the Zohar that Gog and Magog are not merely nations, but archetypes of resistance, the energies that awaken whenever truth begins to rise. He said, "When light seeks to expand, shadow rises to test its strength. That is why the war of Ezekiel appears at the end of times, not because the world is ending, but because the hidden light is finally ready to emerge, and every illusion must reveal its face." Look closely at the verse again. The Eternal tells the prophet to set your face against Gog. In Hebrew thought, the face is the seat of intention. To set one's face is not to fight with anger, but to direct awareness toward what must be confronted. The prophecy begins not with battle, but with focus, with consciousness. Before the armies move on earth, something shifts within the soul of the prophet. He decides to face what most people avoid, the shadow within. This is the essence of every redemption. Before the world is healed, the hidden must be named. Gog and Magog are the names of that hidden chaos. They symbolize the confusion that rises when people mistake power for strength, wealth for blessing, and independence for holiness. The prophecy tells us, the end begins when the false security of man collapses beneath the weight of truth. The Talmud, Tractate Sanhedrin 97b, teaches that the war of Gog and Magog will precede the day when the Eternal establishes peace upon all nations. But the rabbis add a striking line. The Holy One will fight the battle himself. The meaning is mystical. When humanity reaches the edge of its own capacity, when every strategy fails, the divine steps through the veil and reveals that he was never absent, only hidden behind our illusions of control. In Kabbalistic tradition, Gog represents the outer shell, klipa, of the world of action, the layer that covers holiness. When the light of the soul tries to expand, the shell resists. The clash described by Ezekiel is therefore the inner process of birur, refinement. The sparks of holiness imprisoned in material ambition begin to shake, demanding release. That trembling manifests as crisis, both global and personal. It is the universe forcing us to choose. Will we defend the shell or liberate the light within? The Midrash Rabbah connects this moment with the story of Pharaoh. Just as Pharaoh hardened his heart before liberation came, so will Gog harden his pride before the final awakening. The battle is never about armies. It is about stubborn hearts that refuse to yield to the rhythm of compassion. Every generation has its Pharaoh, and every heart its own Egypt. Ezekiel describes how Gog gathers a vast alliance from the north, Persia, Cush, and Put, symbols of distant lands. The north, in Hebrew mysticism, represents concealment, the direction of darkness, where the sun never stands at its height. The nations of the north thus symbolize hidden powers, those unseen structures that influence human destiny. Today, we might recognize them as ideologies, technologies, or desires that promise control, yet lead to emptiness. The text warns that when humanity unites around the wrong center, around pride rather than purpose, a storm follows. But then the tone changes. The Eternal says, "I will sanctify myself through you, O Gog, before the eyes of many nations." In other words, even the force of opposition becomes an instrument of revelation. The darkness does not win, it exposes the brilliance of light. The collapse of falsehood becomes the stage for truth to stand revealed. This is the hidden mercy within judgment. The Eternal uses even chaos to carve a path back to himself. For centuries, rabbis have said that the war of Gog and Magog is already unfolding, not in one cataclysmic event, but as a process of awakening. Each upheaval in history, each shaking of certainty, each cry for justice and redemption, these are the tremors of that spiritual war. And each soul contributes to it by choosing alignment or dissonance, faith or fear. When the prophet speaks of fire falling upon Magog, Kabbalah teaches that it is the fire of truth. In Hebrew, esh emet, the flame that consumes illusion. It burns the idols we cling to, ideology, ego, material obsession, even religion without spirit. That fire purifies rather than destroys. It leaves behind a world ready to remember its source. The prophetic imagery grows intense. Birds devouring flesh, mountains collapsing, weapons shattered. Yet beneath the terror lies poetry. The birds are symbols of liberated souls ascending after confrontation with truth. The mountains are the systems of arrogance that finally crumble. The weapons are the tools of separation that lose their power when unity dawns. In this reading, Ezekiel 39 is not apocalypse, it is catharsis. One of the oldest commentaries, Yalkut Shimoni, says, "When the war of Gog and Magog begins, Israel will not fear, they will sing." Why sing? Because song is faith made audible. When chaos arises, the people who remember the covenant answer not with panic but with praise. The song itself becomes a shield, for sound can pierce the spiritual atmosphere more sharply than any sword. This is why ancient Jews sang the Hallel Psalms during peril. Song aligns the heart with divine rhythm and dissolves fear. So what does this mean for us now? It means the prophecy is a mirror held before our generation. We live in a world trembling between revelation and ruin. Yet the sages assure that when the shaking intensifies, it is a sign not of ending, but of birth. The earth groans because something sacred is being delivered. Ezekiel closes with a promise that the Eternal will pour his Spirit upon the house of Israel. In Hebrew, Ruachi eshpok al beit Yisrael, my Spirit I will pour. The word ruach means both wind and spirit. It suggests movement, renewal, breath. After the storm, breath returns. This is the divine exhalation that revives what seemed dead. It is the same breath that entered the dry bones earlier in Ezekiel's vision. The cycle completes itself, from death to awakening, from fear to clarity. Now we can see the structure of the prophecy not as linear history, but as inner geometry. Chapter 38 begins with confrontation, awareness of the shadow. Chapter 39 ends with infusion, the return of spirit. Between them lies the transformation of the world and of the self. That is why Jewish mystics call this process tikkun olam, repairing the world by repairing the soul. Pause and feel what this means personally. Gog and Magog are not far away. They appear each time you struggle between faith and doubt, between surrender and control. The fire from heaven ignites each time you choose honesty over illusion. The pouring of spirit happens each time you allow compassion to overcome resentment. This is the daily apocalypse, the unveiling that happens inside the human heart. Prophecy, then, is not prediction, but revelation of pattern. Ezekiel saw the eternal rhythm of descent and ascent, of exile and return. He wrote it in the language of nations and wars, so that generations could read it at their own level. But the wise read between the lines and hear the whisper, "Rise, let the covering fall, let the hidden be known." That is why this prophecy was preserved for our time. The age of external wars has mirrored the inner chaos of the soul. Now the invitation is to end that war within. The Eternal does not seek the destruction of the world, but the healing of consciousness. The victory of this battle is peace, not the silence of graves, but the stillness of alignment. So when you read Ezekiel 38 and 39 again, do not see only fear. See the map of transformation, the names, the nations, the fire. They are all symbols of your own journey. The war ends when you remember who you are, a bearer of divine light beneath the shell of flesh and time. Write in the comments if this truth touches you. The fire of truth is awakening in me. Because this is not the fire of destruction, it is the fire that makes gold shine. Stay close, because in the next part we will move from understanding to practice. We will explore how this ancient prophecy can guide your daily life, how to stand firm when the world trembles, how to turn fear into prayer, and how to live as one who already carries the light of redemption. The prophecy of Gog and Magog is not far away. It is happening wherever light meets resistance, and the victory is already written, not in blood, but in breath. When a prophecy descends from the mountain of revelation into the valleys of daily life, it becomes wisdom. That is what the sages taught. Torah is not in heaven. It must dwell among the living. The mystery of Gog and Magog is not a story to analyze. It is a mirror to live by. What we've uncovered in the sacred text must now enter the heartbeat of our days, because if revelation does not transform behavior, it fades like smoke before the dawn. Take a moment to notice the world around you. Every conversation, every choice, every inner reaction is part of the same pattern Ezekiel saw in the spirit. The battle between light and shadow is fought not on distant plains, but in our words, our silence, our intentions. When you choose peace instead of pride, when you listen before you judge, when you bless before you complain, you disarm Gog and Magog within you. The sages of Safed said, "A person who conquers anger defeats 1,000 armies." The armies of the prophecy are symbolic of impulses, anger, envy, fear, greed, forces that rush against the soul, demanding control. When the Eternal told Ezekiel that he himself would fight, he meant that when you yield to higher consciousness, divine energy flows through you, doing what your strength cannot. In that moment, you are not merely surviving chaos, you are transforming it. Imagine waking tomorrow with that awareness. The news will speak of conflict, markets, disasters, but you will remember. These are echoes of the greater struggle. The world trembles because truth is surfacing. When you bring order into your own house, gratitude into your table, light into your words, you participate in tikkun olam, repairing the world. One pure act can reverberate across unseen realms. This is how the ancients lived. Every ritual, every prayer, every blessing before bread was a small victory in the invisible war. Lighting the Sabbath candles was not just tradition, it was declaring that light still governs darkness. Giving charity was not philanthropy. It was the soul's rebellion against selfishness. Even rest was sacred resistance against the empire of anxiety. The Kabbalists teach that the name Gog corresponds to the outer intellect, the mind that believes it controls destiny. Magog is the emotional field that supports that illusion. To live spiritually, therefore, is to reverse their order, allow heart and humility to guide the intellect. The moment you begin your day acknowledging the source, saying Modeani, "I thank you for restoring my soul," you have already reversed the polarity of the world. There is another key. Ezekiel speaks of weapons being burned. The word used, neshek, in Hebrew also means interest or profit. The sages saw in it a warning about systems built on endless taking. When you choose generosity over competition, when you give without calculating return, you are burning a weapon of Gog. You release divine fire, one that purifies economy, thought, and desire. Each generation has its own battlefield. For some, it is poverty. For others, loneliness or doubt. For this generation, the battlefield is distraction. The modern mind is besieged by noise, by constant images and opinions. Gog and Magog today take the form of confusion, the flood of information that blinds wisdom. To practice the prophecy is to build inner silence. 5 minutes of sincere reflection, morning and night, can turn your spirit from battlefield to sanctuary. Now write in the comments if you feel this truth rising in you. I choose peace over pride. This is more than a phrase. It is a declaration of alignment. Every word you write becomes a ripple in the unseen world. The angels, say the rabbis, record every intention of the heart as an act of creation. The comments you leave here are seeds of covenant. How can you live Ezekiel's wisdom? Begin by seeing the sacred pattern in small things. When you are provoked, pause. When you succeed, give thanks. When you fail, learn. Every reaction shapes reality. Gog and Magog dissolve when awareness enters the moment. Even breathing can be prayer if done consciously. As you inhale, say within, "The breath of the eternal enters me." As you exhale, "I release all that resists his peace." This is how prophecy becomes practice. Not through dramatic rituals, but through consistent sanctification of the ordinary. The Eternal does not seek grand gestures, he seeks hearts that remember. The prophet Micah summarized it long before Ezekiel's war. What does the Lord require of you? To act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly. That is how you stand while the world shakes. Sometimes, however, the shaking reaches your own life, loss, betrayal, uncertainty. In those moments, remember that the fire Ezekiel saw was also the fire of purification. It may burn, but it refines. Trust that within the ashes of confusion lies the gold of clarity. The same spirit that promised to restore Israel's breath is breathing through your story too. You are not outside the prophecy. You are inside its fulfillment. If you light a candle tonight, do it with intention. Whisper this simple prayer. May my inner light rise against all darkness within and around me. Then watch the flame. See how it bends, dances, but never breaks. That is the secret of faith. The flame teaches persistence, not by fighting wind, but by feeding from it. When your faith flickers, let it remind you that movement does not mean extinction. It means life. The sages described a future age when swords will be turned into plowshares. This is not only global peace, it is the inner transformation of instinct into insight. Your sharp words become tools for understanding. Your competitive drive becomes creativity. Your fear becomes vigilance for good. Each time you redirect energy from harm to healing, you fulfill Ezekiel's vision. Do not underestimate your role. In Jewish thought, the world stands upon the merit of the righteous. But righteousness is not perfection. It is awareness. One honest heart can sustain many who are lost. Your prayer, whispered sincerely, can balance storms across oceans of spirit. The Eternal measures not the volume of our voices, but the purity of our intention. This is the practice of prophetic living. Face your inner Gog, the illusion of control. Recognize your Magog, the habits that sustain it. Burn their weapons, pride, resentment, fear, through gratitude, humility, and acts of kindness. Sing as Israel sang when surrounded, because song breaks spiritual walls. You will notice after some days a new peace in your atmosphere. The same conversations will feel lighter, your decisions clearer. You will sense protection that logic cannot explain. This is the shield promised to those who align with divine order. It does not always remove storms, but it makes you transparent to them. The light passes through you instead of breaking you. And when doubt returns, as it always does, remember the cycle of Ezekiel's prophecy. After the storm comes the pouring of spirit. Every descent is followed by infusion. Trust that nothing is wasted. Every challenge is part of the purification. Faith is not denial of pain. It is the certainty that purpose hides within it. So walk gently. Listen more. Forgive quickly. These are the true victories of the last battle. The more you embody them, the less the world will need external wars, for the conflict will already be won within the human soul. And if at this moment you feel a quiet conviction rising in you, write again. The fire within me brings peace to my world, because every time one person awakens, 1,000 shadows retreat. Every time one heart forgives, another prophecy fulfills itself silently. You are not a spectator of Ezekiel's vision. You are one of its living verses. In the next part, we will go deeper into the emotional dimension of this mystery. We will enter the human story hidden within the prophecy, how nations, souls, and hearts are all seeking the same reconciliation. And we will see how one decision, to listen, to love, to return, can shift the axis of destiny itself. The war is ancient, but the victory is now. When the prophet Ezekiel finished writing his vision, tradition says he sat in silence for a long time. The scroll lay before him, but his eyes were far away. He had seen the collapse of nations, the trembling of mountains, the descent of fire, and yet what filled him was not fear, but awe, because beneath every image of destruction, he had seen something else, the heart of humanity returning home. There is a secret hidden in all divine revelations. Before redemption appears in the world, it first awakens in someone's heart. One soul feels the stirring, then another, until the vibration becomes collective. What begins as an inner whisper becomes a symphony that reshapes destiny. The prophecy of Gog and Magog is the sound of that symphony beginning to rise again, the clash between the old world and the world that is being born. Let me tell you a story the sages used to share when they explained this prophecy. They spoke of a man who lived in a ruined city after war. Every morning he walked through ashes, collecting broken pieces of stone. People thought he had gone mad. But one day a child followed him and asked, "Why do you gather these things?" The man answered, "Because when the fire passed, it left hidden jewels in the dust." The child bent down and saw it, glimmers of light trapped in the gray. The rabbis said, "That man is the soul of Israel. The world thinks it walks among ruins, but it is collecting sparks for the new creation." That is the emotional heart of Ezekiel 38 and 39. It is not a story of despair. It is the cry of the Spirit searching for light in the rubble. Every time you forgive when it seems impossible, every time you rebuild what was lost, every time you believe again after disappointment, you are that man walking through the ashes, collecting divine jewels. When Ezekiel speaks of bones rising, he is not just predicting national resurrection. He is describing the awakening of the human spirit after centuries of numbness. "And I will put my spirit in you, and you will live." The Hebrew word chai means not only to be alive, but to be renewed. Life, in this sense, is not a biological condition. It is an act of faith. That is why every spiritual awakening feels like both birth and pain. The labor of redemption is emotional before it is historical. When hearts break open, when people cry for meaning, when the illusion of control falls apart, that is the prophecy unfolding. The fire that purifies the world begins as tears of understanding. Maybe you've felt this lately. The unease, the exhaustion, the sense that the world has lost its rhythm. It's not only global confusion, it's a reflection of the inner shaking. The Eternal is calling his creation to remember. He is removing the false ceilings of Gog, the coverings of Magog, so that light can enter again. The collapse of what was is the unveiling of what must be. There is a beautiful passage in the Midrash Tanchuma. It says that at the end of days, the Eternal will ask each soul one question. Did you become what you were created to be? Not how much you earned, not how much you achieved, but whether you allowed the divine image within you to shine freely. That is the victory of Ezekiel's prophecy. The war ends not when enemies fall, but when the soul remembers its origin. You might ask, how can my small life matter in something so vast? The answer lies in the nature of light. A single flame can ignite 1,000 others without losing itself. The redemption described by Ezekiel is collective, but it begins individually. When you align your inner world with truth, you become a channel for the Spirit to flow into the larger body of humanity. That is why emotion matters. Faith without feeling is dry parchment. Prophecy without empathy is noise. The Eternal speaks in vibrations, and the heart is the first instrument that receives them. If you have ever felt deeply moved by beauty, or wept without knowing why, or been filled with gratitude that had no reason, that was your heart resonating with divine frequency. That is how revelation feels. Tonight, I invite you to look inward. Remember the people you have lost, the prayers that seemed unanswered, the dreams that broke, and realize that none of them were wasted. Each one was part of your preparation for wisdom. Just as Israel went through exile to rediscover its covenant, every soul must wander through confusion before finding clarity. Your pain was the field where your compassion grew. The sages compared the human heart to Jerusalem, built, destroyed, and rebuilt again, yet always sacred. Even when it lies in ruins, the divine presence never leaves it. Perhaps this is why the prophecy of Ezekiel ends with a name, Adonai Shammah. The Lord is there. Notice the tense, not was there or will be there, but is. Even in chaos, the presence abides. That is the revelation we carry forward. Gog and Magog are not eternal, they are temporary storms. But the presence, the divine consciousness within creation, never departs. To feel this is to be unshakable. When fear rises, remember, the same fire that burns also illuminates. When loss comes, remember, ashes hide the seeds of new beginnings. The Eternal does not destroy, he transforms. And this is the transformation happening in our time. The more the world trembles, the closer it is to awakening. Prophecy is not meant to paralyze you, it is meant to prepare you. The battle of Gog and Magog teaches that the greatest act of faith is to stand still in trust while everything else collapses. Because from that stillness, the Spirit descends. If these words reach something deep in you, write in the comments, I am ready for the Spirit to enter my life. Because that readiness itself is the gate through which the Eternal walks. There is one more teaching the Kabbalists preserved about this prophecy. They said that after the war, the 7 shepherds of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Aaron, Joseph, and David, will arise again, not as individuals but as energies within every awakened soul. Abraham's faith, Isaac's strength, Jacob's balance, Moses' vision, Aaron's compassion, Joseph's forgiveness, David's devotion, these are not distant traits. They are patterns waiting to awaken in you. The prophecy of the end is also the prophecy of integration, all virtues returning home within one consciousness. And when that happens, the words of Ezekiel will echo through time. I will make known my holy name in the midst of my people, and the nations shall know that I am the Eternal. It does not say the people of Israel alone. It says the nations, because revelation is not exclusive. The covenant was never meant to isolate. It was meant to illuminate. Through Israel's endurance, the entire world learns that the divine presence cannot be erased. If you feel distant from faith, remember that even Ezekiel began his vision by the river of exile. Revelation comes to those who have lost everything and still choose to listen. Perhaps you are in such a place now, between endings and beginnings, between known and unknown. Then you are exactly where the prophet stood. You are ready for the fire that purifies without consuming. And if you desire to go deeper into these teachings, to understand how the ancient rabbis interpreted every symbol and how the Torah conceals universal laws of transformation, ask in the comments for the Jewish Wisdom eBook. It was written as a continuation of these messages to guide your study and help you apply them daily. Simply write, I want the Jewish Wisdom eBook. You will receive guidance on how to access it and continue this path of deeper understanding. Before we close, breathe once more and feel this. Prophecy is not about tomorrow. It is about awakening now. Gog and Magog were always within, and their final defeat happens each time you choose truth over illusion, humility over pride, forgiveness over revenge. That is the true end of days, when love becomes stronger than fear. And so, as Ezekiel saw the valley of dry bones rising, may you also rise. May every forgotten part of you remember its light. May every fear turn into wisdom. May your life become a living prophecy that whispers to the world, the Eternal still walks among us. Write one final phrase before you leave this message. Write it with conviction, as a seal over everything you have learned. Light has won within me. because that is the fulfillment of Ezekiel's vision. Not a war in the heavens, but peace in the heart. Not the end of time, but the beginning of eternity within the human soul.